talk about South Africa's airline industry, never the most stable industry in the world, I must say, with all sorts of airlines over the last 10 years going under. There's a whole litany of them. There's a whole graveyard of them. Let's talk now to Chris Weigenthal, who's the CEO of the Airlines Association of South Africa. He's in the Power Lunch Johannesburg studio. The latest one, Chris, is now Fastjet. We reported on this with great enthusiasm on Power Lunch many, many weeks ago, but here's something that I was sent this morning. It says here, plans for low-cost carrier Fastjet to start offering services in South Africa may have hit another snag after the London-listed company failed to pay a deposit in time to secure the Boeing 737 it had planned to use for its Cape Town to Joburg route from July the 4th. If I'm a passenger and I'm hearing this and you can't pay a deposit for the airline, I think to myself, you know what, maybe I'll cancel this trip, because if they can't pay the deposit, are they maintaining their aircraft?
Well, I think it's a bigger problem that they've obviously got to sort out their ownership structure and the whole basis on which this airline is going to be structured. And clearly there was an arrangement to start looking at leasing in aircraft, and obviously from a payment of a deposit perspective, that seems to have not worked out for them. But I think it really got to get down to the whole question of how this airline is going to be structured, what sort of service it's going to offer. And it has got to, as you rightly say, it's got to be structured in such a way that it instills confidence that the public actually wants to use the carrier and that it can actually offer a viable business.
Let's take a step back now. Who owns Fastjet?
No, look, it's a Lonro-based organisation, so it's UK owned, and I think that's where the basis is. It's obviously a foreign-owned organisation that's looking to expand to various markets within Africa. It started very out in Tanzania and looking to expand into Kenya, and obviously looking at the lucrative South African market.
Yeah, it says here Fastjet's African businesses are struggling. It started operations, as you correctly say, in November in Tanzania, where it planned to base itself as an East African hub. But a lack of action by the government has stunted its plans, and Fastjet has only been able to operate flights between Dar es Salaam, Kilimanjaro, Mwanza, and recently Zanzibar. There's also problems in Ghana because of high taxes. There's also been talk of Swiss shareholders, and it just seems to me that when I fly into Johannesburg International Airport, I see all those old one-time aeroplanes sitting around there. It can't be that difficult to lease an aircraft in Africa. There's lots available, apparently.
There's a lot of available, but I think it goes fundamentally back to the way in which this organisation and the airline is actually going to be structured, and how it's going to put its operation together with a viable aircraft fleet, as well as the necessary crew, and obviously get its operation going. And the company itself has obviously been going through seems to be going through quite a bit of turmoil within Africa in terms of some other conflicts it's been having, changes in ownership now with also the CEO of Fastjet apparently also having resigned and left the organisation. So I think it's obviously needs to do some work internally and try and sort itself out, and then come back and try and get itself going. I think it's obviously got a South African business partner that's trying to work things out with Federal Air. Federal Air is a South African-based airline. Time will tell just to see whether they can also satisfy the licensing council with the viability of their operation.
Do you think there is room for another airline in the domestic market? I noticed that Comair came out with a trading update very recently, and some pretty good numbers, and they said very plainly that one of the reasons that they've done well is because their planes are much fuller because of the exit of One Time recently. But on the other hand, maybe we should just leave it where we are, because it's not exactly, there aren't exactly queues of people. Okay, we've got 80-90% load factors, but that's surely what an airline is all about.
Yeah, we've had a very difficult time. I mean, if you look at the way in which the the aviation market has grown, it grew very strongly up to about 2007, and then we hit a bit of a recession in 2008-9. There was a slight recovery in 2010, and 2011-12 has been an extremely difficult period. It was actually obviously in 2012 where Velvet Sky and One Time effectively left the market. So now there's a question now that obviously there's been a slight reduction, there's been a reduction in capacity. But in the market in South Africa, we have not seen growth over the last couple of years. We look at the numbers, if you look at the airport numbers of passenger numbers, you've got the same sort of numbers going through now that there were in 2007-8. So you really haven't had that growth back. So obviously with the capacity, you could say there was overcapacity, and obviously now with the demise of One Time and Velvet Sky, the other airlines have looked very carefully at their capacity and only increase where they can see that there is a need. Because the important thing is to obviously to raise load factors in such a way that you can obviously raise yields and therefore also make more money, because the airlines have effectively not been profitable over the past couple of years.
It's a very difficult business as well, because on Monday I flew back from Johannesburg to Cape Town on a British Airways flight, and it was only half full. And yet 2 weeks, and that was a Monday lunchtime. Yes. And 2 weeks previously, I flew on a Sunday afternoon on South African Airways, and the A340 that they put on that route was absolutely jam-packed. So yes. It's seasonal even within a week's space.
That's right. And I mean, one of the major tasks that an airline has is obviously to yield manage its flights to ensure that obviously you're getting maximum passengers on board and obviously maximizing your revenue. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there's certain times of the afternoon when there is a less of a peak. I think that flight in the afternoon you're probably talking that was full was probably the flight that they used to bring passengers up to Johannesburg so they can connect onto international flights, probably an afternoon flight. And that's always a very full flight, and that's why they put the big aircraft on board on that route.